Okay, so here we go. Thank you so much for coming and for joining us virtually today. This is our third workshop of the year, and I'm really happy to see that most of you are rejoining from other presentations we have done. So hopefully you'll find this information useful and that it applies to you. I think, well, this I personally apply, I think it applies to everybody, but I'm biased on it because I do believe really in coaching quite a bit. Katie, before we start, do you want to say anything from Network Redevelopment? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Just again to thank anybody who thought about attending in person. Thank you for being flexible and joining virtually, or hopefully our internet will be up and running very soon and this won't affect next months. Thank you again for joining us, and we always like to see you and hope you're learning a lot.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Okay, so let's take on a minute to take a look at what we usually do in the beginning, which is talk about the workshops that we have done and the ones that we have ahead. So we have done so far data and how to move from individual contributor into a leader. And today we are having what I believe is a very important tool to work for work and for your life as well, which is the art of coaching and how to use it to empower your team. And not only that, empower your life as well. So I'm going to teach you some practical techniques of coaching and clarify a few misconceptions that there may be around coaching so that you have a super clear picture and you can see that it's very easy to do as you practice it the most. In April and May, we are going to revisit two of our other workshops that we have done in the past, but we're going to go a step further, which has to do with keeping your team accountable. And what I love about it is that when we see each other next time, we will probably be able to use a lot of the tools we are going to learn today. So we are going to be basically applying what we're learning today into how to keep your team accountable. Then we're going to talk about conflict management. I have a few new tools and things that I have learned recently. On June 25th, we have fostering a strong interagency collaborations, and I have good news because I will have a very strong speaker invited to that event. So I'll tell you a little bit more later. We're going to be talking about marketing strategies for outreach, donor engagement, grant writing, and at the end, we're going to end the year with how to strategize and execute, right? Strategy is important, execution is important as well. So for today, with the things that we usually tend to observe is to be present. Remember that we all have agency to change things around us, that we all learn from each other. How participation is critical in that aspect because we are all learning from each other here. I tend to learn a lot from the audience when I do workshops and, also be able to address things that people think of that I may not have think of. And so it's a great time to share your own thoughts because I'm sure you know a lot more than in some of the aspects that I do. This should be a safe space to share. So in order to do that, we practice doing yes and as opposed to if we don't agree with somebody saying the word but, we tend to it's better received if we acknowledge what the other person is saying, and in addition, we have our own thoughts about it. A few things. So we're gonna have if you want to share while I'm doing the presentation, I don't have access to seeing everyone's face right now. I only have a small screenshot of a few people. So if you want to say anything, please make sure you just let me know. It's easier for me than raising the hand. Also, it's easier for me to hear the questions live than reading the chat. But we'll take time to read chats also if you have comments. We will have a break, a 5-minute break in the middle. We will be sending the PowerPoint and supporting documents after the presentation today, and we will kindly ask you to answer our survey. The feedback is really helpful to improve the way we are doing our presentations. Any questions so far? No? All right. So our agenda for today has many areas. One of them is that we're going to take a quick look at the leadership styles we talked about last time we met. Why is this important? Because it's kind of the base to make a case for me on why coaching is important. We're going to be addressing specifically situational leadership, which is a great model that I think we could all adopt. And then we will move into learning what is coaching, what are the best practices, when to use and not to use coaching, how to have more effective coaching conversations. And at the end of the session, we will have a little practice ourselves on how to coach or how to ask actually coaching conversations. So nobody will be put on the spot. It should be fun and relaxed. So let's start by talking about leadership styles. And this time I would like to open up the room for the greater knowledge. And let's review a little bit what these different kinds of leadership styles are. Does anybody remember any of these styles and can tell me a little bit what they are about? You can pick anything, anyone that you feel more comfortable with. Nobody remembers any of them? Okay, let's see. I'm gonna kind of like call on people. What is a democratic kind of leadership style? Michelle, go ahead.
It's where you agree on what you're going to do. It's a group decision.
It's a group decision, right? What's the setback to a democratic kind of a style?
I would say, if I can. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. No, Consuelo, you go ahead.
Okay, I think that in a democratic, it takes a lot of time to generate consensus.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
So the advantages of democratic style is they're kind of obvious, right? People participate, they engage, they have like an easy, they have a buy-in to the situation because everybody has contributed, and it's very good to use, except for the fact that sometimes it may take very to the reach decisions because everybody is consulted on it. April put in the chat that an autocratic lifestyle said it means my way or the highway, which is basically the leader, right, tends to make all the decisions, and then the people that are working under the leader just follow instructions. I was recently listening to a new leadership book out there, and the author says something that makes so much sense, right? When the primary means of people having businesses had to do with a chain of command, right? When industrialization came about, when the first cars were being made, autocratic leadership style made sense because you needed to follow a series of steps to get to where you wanted to be. But today we are in a communication networking kind of era, right? In which the internet and all the electronic communications have added a new kind of level to our businesses, and in which people are more used to kind of thinking, and so communicating with them in an autocratic way doesn't work so much because you need those people's talents to come up with solutions and involve them into having a greater buy-in into what you're doing. So in the past, during industrialization, having to follow a set of rules was the thing. It made sense. And one person made all the decisions. But today, in the world that we live in, we need many people making many decisions at many different levels. And that's why autocratic is not as good of a leadership style to apply anymore. It can be used in certain places, but not all the time. So does anybody remember what is a transactional leadership style? So transactional tends to be when I tell my employees, okay, I want you to do something, and I'm going to give you freedom to do them, but then I'm constantly checking to make sure that those things are done. And if not, either punishment or reward is used, right? So, okay, we are going to come up with this project, and if it's not done, then I'm taking you out of the next project. So it's very transactional. It's you give and I get, which can be good for some people, but not necessarily for everybody. Then we have transformational, which is a great way of leading people as well, but that concentrates a lot more in personal growth and in personal development and work development for the person inside the work. It doesn't apply to all the time. And then the laissez-faire is the style in which the leader sets the bigger picture, the bigger strategy, and then they let everybody else execute without being in touch or being part of the project themselves. They just come and check in. The setback with that kind of a style is sometimes the leader can be seen as someone that is not as in touch with the reality and the challenges that people that are on the ground doing the work are facing. So those are kind of the styles, just to as an overview for what we spoke about last time. And then if you remember, if you were here, what we talked about is that an ideal way to manage people is to use a combination of all of them. And that is called situational leadership. So a situational leadership may look different depending on what kind of challenge you are encountering at the time. For example, if you need to co-create, right? You have to come up with a project, something or a timeline, something that you do together. Having a decision that is democratic for a project is a good way to approach the project. For example, you need the support of your team, and if the team is closer to that kind of work, then it is better to get that kind of resolution all together. So the leader fosters the engagement and avoids resolving the issue. The group, as a group, has to kind of decide what they want to do. So that works if you have more time to make the decision, and if the engagement needs to be high, right? As you can see by the slides. Now, if you have less time, but you still need high engagement, one of the things that you can do is to consult, right? Ask people for their input. Even if they don't get to co-create together with you, you will ask them, you will get them involved into asking them for their opinion or their feedback. When to use this kind of leadership. If the goal is unclear, you don't have a clear plan, you can come to different people and ask them, how do you think we should proceed in these cases? And what the leader does is just to invite people to facilitate and help making the decision together, right? If you have less time and you don't need as much engagement, one of the things that you can do, let's say you have a project that is already there and ready to go, but you need people to get involved, is kind of to convince them, right? Why moving through this project is something is important. So you need to ask, you need to actually explain to people why you're doing this, why isn't that in a certain manner, and you are able also to offer any kind of explanations, address any concerns that people may have, or, just get back to people if they're asking you any questions. So basically that one is kind of selling a project, and there may be times in which you may need to do something like that. For example, you know that you have to do a healthcare or a turkey drive. There is no way around it. It needs to happen. This is a situation in which you will be more likely to try to sell the project to the people that you're working with, as opposed to coming with a decision together about what are we going to do, right? You may also dip into consulting and saying, well, how do you think it would be the best way to kind of like have the drive-through for the turkeys to be picked up, or the best way to get the other agencies to collaborate in this healthcare kind of initiative. So there is times in which you are going to be using two types of situational leadership at the same time, but in general, this is kind of like the way it works. And last but not least, if you have projects that really you don't have a lot of time to implement and the engagement is not as necessary, you tell your staff what you want to do done and how. So that's what is more similar to the autocratic kind of leadership. And it is important for you as a leader, kind of like for your team to know that you might need to use different types of leadership styles depending on what situation you're in. One of the things that is super important when you are working with the staff is that they have clear expectations about actually what to expect from you as a leader, right? And how you will be approaching different situations when different opportunities come about. One important thing that to keep in mind is when you are the one that is going to make all the decisions, you should be telling your staff that that is going to happen and not have expectations that they will be making decisions as well. You may be asking for their input, but then at the same time, they know that at the end of the day, the final decision is going to come to one person. It may not even be you, it may be a board member, it may be someone else, but it is important to keep that kind of clarity with your staff, and you therefore clarify their role, their responsibilities, and when the deadlines will appear. So let's talk about coaching, because in all of this, I will say, let's go back for a little bit. I think in most of these kind of leadership styles, at least these three, co-create, consult, and sell, coaching will be a great tool for you to use as you have these different levels of communication with your staff. Sometimes when you tell your staff what to do, you always need to use a few coaching tools. But when you're trying to sell, consult, and co-create, the kind of language that you're gonna be using when you coach them would be very, very important, because you want to get their engagement. Before we move into the next slide, I'm gonna take a quick at the chat. As April was asking if whether there is something to be said for the RACI model and the situation in leadership as well. We define roles, each member of a project or program. This is new in the organization. I love RACI, April. I use it all the time. And I think this is a great tool to use to have effective communication with the rest of your members. So we can definitely bring it to the workshop, and I can explain it better when we do the workshop on communication. But basically, it's about who is informed, who is participating, and who should be part of the decision making, and so on. Also, April was saying that democratic is a tough way to lead, because it's hard to get into action sometimes too. So yes, we can definitely visit RACI. I love the model. A lot of people think it's a lot of work, but we will visit it when we do the communication, clear communication in your organization. Sharon, you raised your hand. Do you have a question?
Before you close out the leadership part, I had a quote that came from someone just named Sophie. And it says, poor leadership is building a great team and doing everything in your power to hold onto control. It makes no sense to recruit the best people and tie their hands by not giving them the freedom to perform. I thought it was such a great quote about leadership, because that's part of the, I think part of the transitional type of method. Mm-hmm. It's like, we give you could do this, do that, and then, but still you gotta be there to, make sure if it doesn't get done, what you're going to do about it.
Exactly. Wow. Sharon, thank you for sharing that quote. I think it's a great quote. Yeah, many times we try to hire great people, build a great team, but if we are not aware of how to make them participate and make them part of the process, we have wasted our time trying to get great people. Thank you so much, Sharon.
Sure.
So let's move into coaching and talk a little bit about what it is and what it's not. So the first time I said, okay, I have to put out description for leadership. I kind of like look it up. So it was easy work for me, right? And one of the things that came out, or I felt it was that usually coaching descriptions are very ambiguous. I mean, it tells you in the big picture what coaching is and what it looks like, but it doesn't tell you how it works, right? So for example, in this definition, we have coaching is a leadership and management approach that involves guiding and developing individuals or teams to achieve goals and maximize potential. Great. What does that mean, right? Then it says it's a process that focuses on facilitating learning, promoting self-discovery, and fostering personal and professional growth. I think it is a really good definition because it tells you what coaching looks like in the big picture, but it doesn't tell you how to get it done. So for these purposes, what I'm gonna tell you is what coaching is not, so that you can kind of figure out your own way around coaching and getting a more definition that is more tangible for you. So first of all, coaching is not telling people what to do. It is to know when to provide clear direction and when to let them lead. So it's a leadership style in which you let the people lead while you provide them clear direction, and you are not telling them what to do. They figure out how to do it themselves. The coaching process is a partnership between the supervisor and the supervisee. Okay, so some of the things that are useful for thinking about how to approach a coaching conversation, which you're going to use on some of the styles, right, when you do your situational leadership approach, is that you are going to be active and listening to the person. We have talked about active listening a lot of times at this kind of at our workshops. And basically, just to give you a shortcut, active listening is to pay attention to the person and what they're saying without thinking what to say next. You are listening with curiosity. You are listening to understand as opposed to telling people, which is something that you have to train yourself at, because our society teaches us that we have to be very clever and always have an answer on hand, right? And always know what to do. When in the opposite, if you don't know what you're going to say next and you like to explore, you will have a more enriching conversation with anyone. The other piece about coaching is that it requires to have powerful conversations. Sometimes you have to go into a level of sharing with a person that is not personal. I just want to clarify, this is nothing has to do with personal, but it's deep. You are able to have a conversation with a person that goes beyond what you're seeing right there at the moment. And last but not least, it requires direct communication. Also, another thing that we are taught, and it's like, it is, you see it very often in the society we're living in today. We are afraid of asking questions. We don't know, like, if we ask a question, how that person is going to react, and we are afraid of that reaction. So having a direct communication using the right language is the right way to kind of get to people and kind of help them out to figure out what is it that they need to either complete a project or to work with you or to come up with a new idea. And so we're going to practice that today. Okay, so a few other things that coaching is not. Coaching is not mentoring. Mentoring is a very important tool, but mentoring has the approach of I've been there and done that. Which means that when you mentor, you tend to provide people with advice and you tend to provide people with resources, right? You are a more senior manager, or you are more senior than the person that you are helping out. And you say, oh, I remember I had a situation like this, and this is exactly how I did it. If you want to find resources, I'm going to connect you with this and this person. Mentoring is great, and there is a place and a time for that. But it's not coaching. It's not the same. In coaching, you use a different way to communicate, okay? And like I said, having mentors in your organization, internally or externally, is a great tool to have, especially when people are looking and they're new and they're looking for the way around doing things. Definitely have it. but it's not the same as coach. Also, coaching is not being a friend. The coach must be objective and not judgmental. When we have a friend, usually a friend gives us advice, but they have their own agenda in mind. Even if that agenda is for your own good, right? Let's say I'm talking to a girlfriend and I'm telling them that I'm going back for the 5th time with the same boyfriend that I had issues with for years. Your friend has your best interest in mind. Therefore, she's going to give you advice that she believes is best for you. Also, there is a place and time for that, but it's not coaching, right? It's not being friends with the people that you are coaching. And, many times we strike good friendships at work, which is a nice thing to have. But when you're coaching somebody, you must remain objective and non-judgmental. I have had to coach many staff members that I consider friends, and I have to kind of step out of the role as a friend and step in as the role of a coach. Coaching is also, it's not consulting. So many times you're going to have in your organization consultants coming in. The role of a consultant is they also have an agenda. They are asked to produce something and show a certain result. So what they do is to bring their own expertise to the table. In coaching, the expert is the person that you are coaching because they are going to come up with their own solutions. So it's not the same. Again, there is a place and time for consulting. Sometimes you need consultants to come in and resolve something that hasn't been resolved, but it's not the same as coaching. So just a little word about coaching. It is easy to coach someone when you are coming from an outside environment, like me. Like if I'm called in to coach somebody, it is easy for me to do it because I understand only one perspective and I'm going to take, what they're telling me as the base for having that conversation. It is a lot harder to use a coaching style when you are a supervisor, because when you are supervising somebody, you know their strengths and you also know the things that they need to grow into a little bit and the things that they're not doing so well, right? So it's very difficult to become impartial if you're having a conversation with a staff member that you know has some shortcomings and they're conceiving themselves in a different way. So that makes coaching for a supervisor a little bit harder, but it is possible, right? If you are able to step outside and ask these questions that we are going to learn about today. So I just wanted to acknowledge that when I work with somebody, I work from what they are telling me, and we move into that, looking at things from that lens. When you are within the organization, it's a little bit harder because you are seeing the consequences of how things are working or not working necessarily. So there is a little bit of bias in there as well. All right, so I'm gonna make my case for coaching, and Edna Vincent Milari makes it better. When she was in college, she wrote a letter to somebody saying, "Please give me some good advice in your next letter. I promise not to follow it." So how many of you have ever given advice and it wasn't followed by people? Right? Plenty of times. It happens all the time. Somebody says, "I need your advice," and they come to you, and what they tell you is, what they do is completely the opposite of what you told them. And then you feel like, why did I even open my mouth? What, I didn't even say anything if they went ahead and did something absolutely different. Why do you think people don't listen to advice or don't follow advice? They may listen to it, but they don't follow it most of the time. If you want to open up your mic and just tell me a few things that you think keeps people from following advice. Yes.
I think they,
Go ahead,
people
Wendy.
already know what they want to do, I think, and then they want other opinions, but not necessarily to follow.
Right. Sometimes people know already what they want to do and they just want confirmation. April.
Or maybe sometimes it feels like it's a weakness. You've asked for the advice because you sometimes feel a compulsion to, but then to follow it seems like a weakness in your own abilities or that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Anybody else? So one of the things that I often tend to think about advice is that advice doesn't work because what may have worked for me doesn't work for everybody,
Mhm.
right? People need to experiment themselves. And we know that very well with young people, right? We tell them, oh, we give them all the advice of the things that we have learned in our many years on earth, and they don't follow it because they need to learn themselves. They need to experiment themselves. And maybe their situation is not exactly the same situation we had when we were young. So people need to experiment. And also sometimes when I give advice, it may be according to my personality, the way I think about life. It may be according to my own situation, and it doesn't quite fit the other person's situation. So instead of giving advice, coaching or asking questions, right, is a better tool because then the person will get to discover what fits them as opposed to what fits you or what will work for you. Any other things that anybody will want to add before we move into the next slide? All right. So here's my case, why coaching versus selling. If you work with your team and you have the opportunity and the time to coach them or one team member, you will get more buy-in. If an idea comes from the other person, even if you were thinking exactly about the same idea, if that person comes up with the same idea, they will have more buy-in in the situation because they feel that they own it. Also with your team will be more independent. As we were talking about last time in our previous presentation, when you make all the decisions, it can be exhausting. It can be stressing. There is a lot of weight on your shoulders, right? Your team either will become reactive to you, right? And will not want to do what you want to do, or they will become very, very dependent on you to the point in which they don't move a finger without asking you. And that can be very, very stressful for people who are leading. So it puts a lot of pressure on the leader. And people rebel when they feel their input is no value. I don't know if I gave this example I always talk about it, so I forgot if I said it, but I used to have a boss that used to tell me all the time, we've done that. We already did it. That's not gonna work. And so on and so on. And it was really hard over time to become engaged, to come up with ideas, to be creative, because you were already expecting that every time you said something, the boss would say, we have done that. I'm not saying my boss was wrong. They had done it and it hadn't worked. But I have to tell you, one time I gave the opportunity to a team member to do something that I didn't think it was going to work because we had done it before. And guess what? It worked for her. And she was able to make something happen that hadn't happened in years. Whether it was her personality or the way she was, just giving the opportunity for people to try says a lot about you as a leader. Even if you feel that you are investing resources into something that is not going to work, think about it the opposite way. It's like this person is learning and they're growing. And the more they grow, the better team member they are going to be, because I'll be able to have their input and their learning as part of our process. So like I said before, you will be less overwhelmed and your team will feel more inspired. Few notes on that. Many people are not used to being coached. So it's common to be asking people, what do you think is best? And people telling you, I don't know. It's not uncommon, but don't give up. People do know inside themselves where the solution is and what it is. You just have to kind of persist and continue asking these questions, even if people, until they get used to kind of like thinking for things, coming up with ideas and so on. We'll see a few techniques that you can use today. The other piece is that culturally, right? Many people are not used to being asked their opinion. So if we come from different countries in which authorities were very, very strong, or authoritative kind of leadership is being used, it's very, very hard for that person to become used to being in a more participatory, democratic kind of environment. So you gotta keep going. So if you are coaching people that you supervise, you are giving them a great gift, the gift to think for themselves. Like I said before, most people have the answers. They just need to learn how to search for the answers themselves. A couple of things here. One of the things that gets really, really hard to get used to is silence. But silence can be a great friend. So if you are asking a question and the person is not ready to answer, let it sit for a little bit. And you see that the person will come up with that answer at some point. But silence is okay. And we are pretty uncomfortable with that culturally. So I think we touched upon here for a little bit. I was explaining for myself what the difference between when I do coaching from the outside versus what we do coaching when people do coaching internally. But a couple of things important to speak about. First, what is coaching for performance? When you coach somebody for performance, you are addressing or fixing an issue that is happening within their performance. When you are coaching for development, what you are helping that person is to learn, to grow, and to reach out for improvement. So that's kind of the difference. And it is important for you to have super clarity before you step into coaching a coworker or somebody that is working under you. Because if you are going to address or fix an issue, your approach may be a little bit different than learning, growing, and improvement. So addressing or fixing an issue has to have certain deliverables that you will want that person to come with and through, and you will empower that person to be able to give you those deliverables. When you are coaching for development, is a more relaxed conversation. You are learning about the person, you are learning what the goals are, what is it that they want to improve, what kind of things they want to make stronger professionally for themselves, and so on. So, before we move into the next slide, I'd like to open up the floor and see if any of you has any instance in which they felt they have coached for one or the other someone, and what was your experience? Has any one of you ever had a situation in which you felt you were coaching somebody, either for improving their performance? Yes, Michelle, go ahead.
I worked with some interns, and it was trying to get them to do their project and giving them a lot of leeway, but also helping them along and making suggestions in a way that it was still their project.
Good. So what kind of things you did that you felt really worked in that situation for you?
Get them to write down what they thought they needed to do and then go over it together. So they're driving the project.
Awesome.
And regular meetings.
Regular meetings, checking in. How do you? Go ahead.
This was part of it was during COVID. So it was a whole new way of doing things.
How do you feel the experience was for the students or the interns? Sorry.
They liked it. They appreciated it. They actually stayed through COVID, and then they started to come in person. And it was very helpful to be there in person as well.
Awesome. Did any of them ever said, "Oh, I don't know what to do. Can you tell me? Just tell me what to do"?
Yeah. I mean, I made myself very available, and I said, and tell me when you hit the point where you need more assistance. And that way they were the ones who were saying, I need help. And they got to do different projects that way. And that way they could see where they were amiss. Although sometimes I'd have to say, oh, I noticed something's not quite right. What do you think?
Oh, so you checked in and went back and said, okay, let's readjust this goal. And what do you think? That's excellent. That's coaching right there. Awesome. I'm sure the students appreciated that approach very much. Anybody has had also to work with somebody to help them learn, growth, or improve? Get them to the next level. Nope. Consuelo? I thought you had unmuted yourself. Sorry.
No.
Not to put you on the spot. I thought you had unmuted yourself. I was moving the screen. Okay, Sharon, your hand is up. So I know you.
Oh,
Did you mean to have it up?
probably not, but no, but I have, spent even in my job that I do now with just dealing with individuals, um trying to coach them into as far as developing their confidence, their even how to put things in place for themselves. It's not Coaching is not easy, and I think somebody had said you get to a point sometimes where you get a little frustrated because people don't always receive it, and they don't really do they do the opposite practically of what you tell them to do.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't want to be that person to be negative about it or whatever. So I tend to just let them go ahead. I give them all the tools that they need
Mm-hmm.
and then let them go ahead and do it. And then eventually, if it works or don't work, then they'll, some people will check in and say, well, I did it this way, it didn't work or whatever. Or they try to take what you tell them and kind of put their own twist to it or whatever, that kind of thing. So
Mhm.
I find coaching is good, but for me, it brings out some of my perfection issues.
Uh-huh.
Control perfection issues, because I feel like why aren't you, I want to say that. I want to say, why didn't you or why aren't you? But then I have to realize that I'm only giving you, some foundation to what you need to do. So
Mhm.
it's I find that to be, um, just sit back and let them observe,
Mhm.
and then, this is what I would do, and then try to get them to put all their skills and talents to the forefront and then decide what would work for them.
Mhm.
That's how it's just like a free form coaching. I don't really have rules or regulation and stuff. Somebody comes to me, that's pretty much what I do.
Thank you for sharing. And I have to say, as a somebody that does coaching all the time, I have to say that people don't always fall through with what they decide they're gonna do. But here's the thing: if you are able to work with somebody and find out what's the reason behind that lack of follow through, you may be able to find patterns and beliefs that the person holds. And once the person realizes that this is what is actually ruling is under the underline of what is happening for them, as soon as they recognize it, they may be able to fix it. But if they don't know it's there, it's very difficult for them to change it. So in coaching, I do encounter that people make a lot of plans of what they're gonna do next, and they don't follow through. It's okay. It's an uncomfortable moment to move through. Eventually they will get there. But thank you so much for sharing, Sharon. I'm so glad that your hand was up by accident. All right, so here are 5 essential elements that you always have to observe when you are coaching somebody. The first one is, like we said before, is to use active listening, which means you are actually listening to the person as opposed to waiting for them to finish to say your next thing. A good thing to use when you are listening actively is just to make sure that you are very curious about what's coming next. It's an excellent way to listen. Like, you really want to listen to what the person is saying and find out what else is there. As opposed to like, oh, I already know this happened to me 10 years ago and I have the solution for you. The next one is to have a non-judgmental mentality. And there are two things I want to say about non-judgment. The first one is that judging is normal. It is okay. Things come up in your mind. It is a shortcut that our brains have to protect us from any threats that may be happening outside our sphere. So we all have ideas of what things look like. The most important thing is that we realize that these ideas are made up by our own brain and not necessarily the reality that that person is that way, right? So as soon as we judge, just keep an eye on whether your judgment is something that is there for sure, or whether there could be other possibilities to the situation, right? So just keep your judgment somewhere on the side and continue having that conversation without like using it to respond with it or to make up an opinion. The second thing I want to say about judgment is that you have to be very, very careful if your judgment goes a step farther. And this is what I think. I think as soon as we believe that a person is this or that, right? Something they have done becomes who they are. Let's say, for example, they have manipulated a situation, or they have manipulated many situations. That's how they, move around in the world. As soon as I believe that that person is a manipulator, I miss the opportunity to get to know that person as a whole. Because all of us as people have many different dimensions to ourselves, right? So person, yes, they may use manipulation a lot in their lives, and that's something definitely they will want to work on, right? To avoid toxicity and other things that come with it. But if you look at that person as a whole, as a manipulator, and you don't see anything else about that person, you are missing the opportunity to getting to know what are the other parts of that person that also come into play, right? They may be a good friend. They may be, a team player. There may be other things to that person that you want to keep in mind. And as soon as you judge that person and give them that characteristic, this person is that, you're missing the opportunity of getting to know them as a whole. Another essential element of coaching is acknowledging. Acknowledging looks like, kind of repeating what the other person said, acknowledging what is going on with them. For example, if somebody's nervous about doing a presentation, you can say, I understand this may be a stressful situation for you, and I want you to, take this and this step so that you feel successful. So it's very important in these cases when you're acknowledging somebody, is that you understand that acknowledging someone doesn't mean that you think they're right. You're basically just acknowledging that the way they feel is okay under the circumstances they are in. Therefore, you do not use the word but, because as soon as somebody says but, they are kind of like erasing everything, right? Oh, I understand how you say, how you feel, but all of my but erases everything I said before, right? You want to use the word and. Here are other things that you want to consider. Asking questions, and we will learn about coaching questions today, which is a lot of fun. And then ensure understanding. So you rephrase to repeat back. You make sure that you have understood correctly what the other person has said. So active listening, try to put your judgment aside, acknowledge what the person said, ask questions, and then ensure understanding and rephrase and repeat. So let's talk a little bit about questions. So have you heard the terms of, closed questions versus open-ended questions? Yes? Do you know what the difference is between one or the other? Michelle, would you mind sharing what's the difference?
A closed question is more like a yes or no type thing, or you're given choices. Open-ended questions means you can just go on.
Absolutely. You are absolutely right. So, opening the questions means that they are non-leading, right? I'm not expecting you to answer in certain way. It's a question that is absolutely open for you to kind of decide what your answer is going to be. It does not incite a yes or no answer, just like Michelle said. And they start with how, what, when, where, and who. You can also use why, but why can be tricky. I try to stay away from asking why until I'm totally sure it's not going to come out wrong, because if you ask why, what can happen sometimes is that people may think that you are judging the way they acted just because you're asking why. So to ask a non-leading question is very easy as long as you practice it and you become familiar with it. You just turn your question around, and we will be practicing this today, and you ask your question with any of these question starters. How, what, when, where, and who. When I started taking my coaching training, that was very difficult for me to do because we are used to having a communication style that is a little bit different. So what I did for myself was to put a sticky note on my computer. Or around, wherever I was, I had a sticky note that reminded me of these beginnings of questions. And what I did was every time I tried to start asking a question, I tried to rephrase it by using these starters. I think it worked out for me, although I'm not giving you advice, but it worked out for me, and it really got me going into using this kind of questioning style more often, and especially during coaching, because you really need to use that style. So I didn't get the yes or no answer. Getting the yes or no answer really doesn't take you anywhere, and it doesn't allow the other person to be able to develop their own ideas and talk about the things that they come up. I'm going to quickly take a look at the chat. Laura says that closed questions provides the answer. Yes, many times they provide the answer, and they're leading, and you are already telling people, what to do. So I think it is time for us to take a little break. Let me make sure that I don't have any other slide coming in. Oh, yes, I do have a couple of more slides. This is important because there are times when using coaching is going to be appropriate, and other times in which it's not going to be appropriate. So I'm going to tell you when to use coaching. When a problem-solving mentality is needed. That's a great time. There is a project you guys need to resolve, something that is happening. That's a good time to use coaching. When you need input on how to move forward with a project, that's also a good time to use coaching, right? It's kind of like what we were talking about, using this leadership style that changes depending on what you are facing at the moment. When you need to reach an agreement on a decision. Okay, here's a big decision. We all need to meet together. Use coaching instead of telling people what to do. When you are working on your team strategy, if you are able to and have the time to build a strategy around anything you have to do and make your team participate, there are more chances that the team is going to engage into following that strategy. So that's why when consultants come in and do a strategic planning for organizations, they do consult a lot of people. They have a lot of meetings. They bring a lot of people in, right? Because you are going to need the different people that participate in that organization to be part of those decisions. And the best way is to consult them, use coaching when you're doing that. When you want to enhance people's skills, when you want to boost performance, let's say you have a team and you want to have them perform a little bit more or a little bit better, you want to use coaching. And when you are working with somebody for personal development or professional development, right? Let's say you have a team person that is really, really good. You want them to grow. You see them as a future manager, a future supervisor. You want to get them there. they themselves don't know where they want to go, you will want to use coaching and have coaching conversations with them to help orient them and help them come up with what is right for them. I have had situations in which what the person came up with had nothing to do with what I intended them, but that's the risk you run. At the same time, it's very valuable to know if a team member has a different objective in their lives and they want to accomplish something different than what you have thought for them. You know that early, right? Because otherwise you will have someone that said, yes, I love this job and thank you for all the trainings you gave me, but I want to pursue my long-term goal, which is to be a farmer. And I'm going to move down to or up to Vermont, and this is what I'm going to do. So it is important to use coaching, even if the answers that you are going to find are not exactly what you're looking for. It's very good because you learn early. Okay, so those are the situations in which using coaching is appropriate. When not to use coaching? When you have a clear objective that needs to be accomplished in a specific manner. You know that this is a project that it needs to be done in this way, and it needs to be accomplished in this way. In that case, it's better that you outline expectations, you outline timelines, you tell your team why this is important, you sell it to them, and then you move on with the plan. Sometimes in our organizations, those guidelines come from outside. Let's say, for example, we have governmental contracts. And the government is telling us, this is how we want you to do the work. And these are the objectives you need to meet. There is not a lot of room in there for you to be creative or to have your team to be creative. You may want to use other opportunities for them to be creative, but if the government is giving you a system and some goals you have to meet in certain manner, it's just better that you save your time. And also you manage your people's expectation, like your team's expectation of the project, by telling them this is what we need to do. This is why we need to do it this way. And this is another time that is not good to use coaching is when you need immediate solutions. Like something is going on right now. You are not going to conferencing and go into meetings and ask everybody, what do you think is best? You may want to gather your best people, maybe if you want to do a little bit of brainstorming, but if you need immediate solutions, coaching is not the right time to do that. Coaching is, you can look at it as a more long-term investment as opposed to like something that needs to happen immediately. When there is lack of commitment, you know, I have tried several times to engage an employee that is not necessarily engaged in their job. Their reasons may be a little bit farther than, like, more than can be managed with coaching. And if that employee has absolutely lack of commitment, it's very hard to get them to commit unless you go into like super deep coaching and you find out like super deep reasons, but you will not be prepared for that. So you can save your time there. Also, if there are disciplinary issues, there are other venues that you should be using to discipline someone as opposed to coaching. And we will talk about that when we move into our next keeping your team accountable and how to discipline certain situations. And I think those are all my items for when not to coach. And then we can take a 5-minute break. I'm going to go and get some water. And I'll see you in 5 minutes. Let's see, it's 1:31, so I'll see you at 1:36. So I'm going to start the recording again. And actually, it was great that you asked me that question, Katie, because I wanted to ask anybody if they had any questions or thoughts at this point before we move into the second part of the presentation. So what you're thinking about that, what Katie was asking me was about the fine line between, you know, your team being empowered to do what they have to do to get the project done, and them thinking that you as a leader are passing all the work to them, right? And not supporting them on what they're doing. So what I was telling Katie, that a very good approach to use when there is a project that you want your team to develop completely, but you want to be there for them, right? is one is to set clear expectations of the beginning at the beginning of the project, to let them know how that project is going to work and what's the goals behind them kind of running the project. And also to check in once in a while to see if they need any support to be able to move the project along. So it doesn't necessarily look like you are checking on them to check if the job has been done. It looks like it will feel to them more like, okay, if I need anything, my leader is there for me, and they will ask me if I need resources, if I need anything to help them get through the project.
Thank you.
So does anybody else has any questions so far? Anything that you saw that we talked about that maybe doesn't make sense to you or that you find challenging? No? All right. So I'll share the PowerPoint again, and now we're gonna move into actually like what does coaching look like? Like we're gonna have actual questions that you guys are going to be able to use and keep for yourselves so that you can start practicing different styles of coaching. One thing that I wanna say, I always say this at our workshops is just one step at a time. You are not gonna learn necessarily, and some people have a natural coaching leadership style. I have to say some people are really, really good at being coaches. So, but if you don't feel that you are very comfortable with coaching your team or using a coaching style, it is okay. You don't have to be a different person tomorrow. You can practice little by little and start incorporating these techniques as you go, and it will become more natural to you. But we have a good set of questions that can kind of get you started. And of course, because we're going to share this PowerPoint, you will have them handy for you to use. Okay, so let's go back to this script and put in PowerPoint mode. Okay. So let's talk about the basics of coaching. So like I said before, coaching is a lot about asking questions instead of giving solutions. One thing that is important when you ask questions when you're talking with your team is just to keep the questions very simple. Do not stack them. Sometimes we have two or three different thoughts at the same time. Just write them down in case you don't want to forget them, but I will say just to try to be short and specific. If you put too many questions into one, people tend to get confused and they don't know exactly which one they should answer first or which one they should be asking. So the shorter your question, the better. The other thing is try to adopt a non-judgmental style. And that is a point in which you want to really keep an eye on your body language. Many of us have a face that reacts exactly how we are feeling. And it is important just to make sure that we learn how to maintain a more steady kind of like approach with our physical movements as well. That takes training too. But if you can work on your poker face, that will be awesome, because even if your judgment is going on inside, hopefully the other person will not notice and they will be able to open up with you as well. Yes, you have feelings, and when they come up, it is essential to keep them in check. Remember that feelings are reactions that are automatically in our body. They're based on our previous experiences in life. They're based on something that the other person may have said that may be triggering to us. So it is very important just to make sure that it's not about putting our feelings to the side. It's just to make sure that at that time it's not the proper time to express them. You have to wait a little bit because as you process them, they look differently. Another important thing is to get past the story. Look for the bigger picture. You look deeper. So when you are coaching a staff, they are going to come up with their own story that they are telling themselves, and they will want to tell you the whole thing. And you don't want to interrupt them, but then at the same time, you want to look deeper than that story they are telling you. for example, let's say, you know, I always come in late because I do not, you know, I want to, you know, look my best in the morning, and I go and check my, you know, myself all the time, and then I end up running late and the traffic gets bad. And, you know, this is the whole story that this person is telling you, that they really believe that this is the reason why they come in late to work. You want to go in deeper. Like, for example, say, you know, what is it about your appearance that you feel that needs, you know, that you have to take a look into so much? You may have surprising answers. Oh, well, I grew up in a household in which, you know, my mother was very, like, you know, she really wanted me to look my best all the time, and I really feel insecure about my looks because I was always told that, you know, I wasn't enough, right? So there is a deeper pattern going on there, and it's not like you're going to become somebody's psychologist, because obviously you are not prepared for that. But I assure you, as soon as that person says something like that, they're going to realize it themselves, that they are holding a belief that runs deeper than the behavior that is showing up. So get past the story, look for the bigger picture, ask questions that go deeper in. Use curiosity, which we talked about already, right? If you're curious about what else is in there, you may be more likely to get more answers. Clarify. Make sure you're always clarifying that you understood correctly, not only for yourself, also for the person to have the opportunity to hear themselves what they say and be able to kind of clarify what they said, because sometimes things come out not as they intended them to. And if you are not ready to have the conversation, ask to circle back and speak at a later time. Sometimes you may have a staff member that may come to you very upset about something that just happened, and you are not ready to have that conversation at that time. You were doing something else. You have a deadline that you need to meet. There is a lot that is going on, and you are not in your best self at that moment to be able to have a deeper conversation with that person. It is okay to ask them to circle back and say, I would love to talk to you about what's going on here. I want to support you. Is there any chance that we can talk later, or we can talk tomorrow? Right now, I have to meet this deadline, and I want to be able to give you the time that you need, deserve. First, people will understand most of the time, and unless they're going through a lot of stress at that moment. And you know, you can ask them to schedule a meeting so that you can be prepared, you can be balanced and feeling more emotionally stable to be able to talk with them. So if you ever feel you are not ready to have a coaching conversation, do not force yourself into doing it. Give yourself a break and tell the person that you will need to get back to them and meet at another time. Obviously, make sure you follow up. Don't drop the ball there. I think that one of the things that's very important to keep in mind as a manager is that gaining people's trust is not easy. And once you have gained your team's trust, you want to keep it. And the best way to keep the trust is just by continuing doing what you say you are going to say, staying true to your word and being as responsive to them as you can. Okay, so here are a few tips and a few questions that are good to explore in when you want to do effective coaching. First, ask for permission. If you are going to have a conversation that is a coaching conversation with that person, and you want to kind of like have an opinion, they want to ask for your opinion, or you want to kind of, well, do I have this one here? Sorry. Oh, yes, here we go. You want them to, you know, to say something to them. You will want to first ask them if it's okay with them that you share their opinion. For example, questions that you can ask. Would you like to hear what I think about this? Right? Sometimes people come to you to ask for your advice, but what they really want to know is one is to get things off their chest. And they're not expressing that because they don't know, right? but you want to check in and make sure that that person is ready to hear what you have to say, and you want to ask for permission before you do that. How would you feel about exploring that thought a little bit? That's another way to ask for permission. Like, let's dive into it deeper, but how do you feel about it first? The same way, sometimes you may not be ready for a coaching conversation. The other person may not be ready for a coaching conversation. So you want to check in with them and make sure that proceeding that way is okay with them. Also, if they have some beliefs or something that you feel, can be looked at like in the bigger picture, you can ask, would you mind if I challenge you on this? For example, let's say you have a staff member who feels that they cannot do a presentation in front of all these people. They are not ready. They are just too nervous. They are not prepared. They don't have the knowledge, etc., etc. You believe that person does have the knowledge and they know what they are going to do. Maybe they are not quite ready to hear it straight from your mouth. You may want to check. Do you mind if I challenge you on this? And then you can tell them the reasons why you believe, right? That person is ready to do the presentation, they're prepared, and why you pick them to do it. So asking for permission is very important. People really appreciate it. People feel heard when you ask for permission. The next one is bottom lining. Like I said before, people tend to come with their story. And although you don't want to interrupt their story, at times you may have to interrupt their story because their story may go on for a very, very long time and may start diving into areas that you didn't intend this to go. So a good technique is kind of like getting to the bottom line, is to help the person to get to the point of the matter. And you're going to help them by being sustained and helping that person stay focused. So some questions you can ask when you are bottom lining. For example, if you don't mind that I interrupt you, what are you attempting to convey by what you're telling? Right? What is the main objective here? What is it that you're trying to achieve? What resources do you need to make this happen? Or even, what are the measurable outcomes you are aiming for? These are all samples of questions that you can use when somebody comes with their story. They come to tell you why they couldn't serve these many people last month because all these things happen, which may be super, super legitimate. And you want to get to the bottom line by asking this person, what is it that you need, right? How can I help you? How are we going to measure your outcomes? What is it that you want to get at? So, of course, they have their own story they have told themselves, but at the end of the day, what is important is what is it that they want to accomplish? And you want to empower them to think that way. Get past story and move on into what the solutions are. So bottom lining is a good tool to use to do that. The next one is brainstorming. Sometimes people know the answer, but they don't know they know the answer. So you can help them and give them a little push by helping them brainstorm. The process of brainstorming, the goal of it is to generate as many ideas as possible, not to evaluate the ideas right then. It's really to generate ideas so that the person can start seeing that they can think out of the box. And to that one problem, there may be many, many solutions. So questions that you can ask, and always ask for permission first. What do you think about brainstorming for some ideas right now, right? You are facing a challenge. How about we talk about some ideas that may be alternatives to the challenge, to solve the challenge you have at the moment? If the person says, well, I don't know, I don't have any ideas at the moment, you can say, oh, how about I propose the first idea? Because of course, as a manager, you have a lot of ideas. You have a lot of ideas of how things should be done and so on. You have lived through this already. Right? So you can say, I propose the first idea, and then you do. There is no limits. So anything that comes to mind, we are not evaluating now. When you engage into the process of brainstorming with people, they will start coming up with some things that are totally out of the box. And even though you may not be able to implement some of them, they will see that they do have ideas and they just need to get them out. It's a way to empower. A word of warning on this. If that person gives you an idea that is crazy, don't say it. Just keep on brainstorming. Don't be like, yeah, well, yes, but that's not possible. Just try to hold yourself back and say, okay, what else? And what else? And what else? And then, you rein in and say, okay, out of all these ideas, what do you think is more doable? You keep working with them to get them to an idea that they can try, right? But yeah, sometimes people may come up with things that you say, what the hell? How did they think about this, right? But it's okay. It's okay. It's part of the process of coming up with that some of the things that they do. So stay completely neutral as you do this, okay? Again, try to keep the judgment on the side and say, oh, wow, how did this come up? Just keep it to yourself. You are not evaluating, you're just coming up with ideas. And like I said before, always ask for permission to brainstorm. Okay, the next one is one that happens all the time. Resistance. You will hit resistance and be prepared for it. When you are coaching your team, you will hit resistance because resistance is part of the growth process. Sometimes people are just too overwhelmed and you need to take them into smaller steps to meet the challenge that they need to meet. Break the project into smaller steps, help them figure out how to get there. But you're going to face resistance, and this is the right time to have that clear conversation, that conversation that goes deeper. And you can ask questions, for example, what is holding you back? I don't think I can do this. What is holding you back? Well, I'm insecure. I don't have enough skills. How can I help you to acquire these skills? You kind of like continue on asking these questions. What is holding you back is one thing that people may not think of by themselves. And you, by asking them, you're giving them the gift of realizing there is something that is keeping them from feeling that they can accomplish something. Another question. What really bothers you about doing that? What would it take to get over that hurdle? What would it mean to face that fear, that worry, or that concern? How do you want to move through this? How is that idea or belief working for or against you? For example, if I have a staff member that says, this is never going to work because the people that we serve do not understand, that they need to do A or B in order to get C. How is that belief that people cannot understand that in order to get to C, they have to go to A or B? How is it working against you or in your favor? So, then the person can develop and think about more things. And here's the thing about asking questions. When you ask questions, don't ask them with the intent to hear that you were correct on your thinking. Ask it for the intention of learning more. Sometimes you may ask a question and you may think you have the answer to the question already. That's leading. You don't want to do that. What you want to do is to ask these questions in order to really learn more about the person that you're working with. So resistance is normal. And as you become better at doing coaching, you will become more used to getting resistance from people. It's okay. It's their own feelings. They need to process it. You're just there to hold the mirror and to have the opportunity to help them think more deeply. Then the next one, which is one of the most important tools that you have to use in coaching, is clarifying. Make sure that you understand correctly what they said. For example, what do you mean by X? For example, you can insert any word in the X. You can say, what do you mean by balance? If somebody says, I need to find more balance in my life. What do you mean by balance? we all think that we know balance is the same thing, but balance may mean different things to different people, right? Oh, that means for me that I need to dedicate 50% of my time to my family and 50% of my time to my job and my own and my family and my own well-being. But for other people, it may be like I want at least 15% for my own well-being. For many different people, it may look very, very different. So when you ask, what do you mean when you say so and so, you have the opportunity to learn about what that person is thinking. Another way to ask it is, can you explain what X means to you? I recently had a conversation with a team that I was coaching, and everybody kept on talking about professionalism. It was about 3 people. So at some point in the conversation, I asked each one of them to explain what professionalism meant to them. And although professionalism looked a lot similar for each one of them, the way it helped was that they understood, they had a common understanding of what being professional meant to each one of them. And from them, they found something that they could agree into and start working from. So when you have disagreement, clarifying for teams is very important as well, because sometimes people feel that they are on the opposite side of the spectrum, when in many ways they are on the same page. They think about things the similar way. And when you clarify, you give them the opportunity to explain that. Another one, what does it mean to you to X? For example, what does it mean to you to meet other people's expectations, right? That may be different from one person to another. Please explain to me when you say X. Same thing, is similar to the other questions. And finally, but not least, this is a very good question when you are running out of questions to ask. Would you please expand on that? And here can you expand on that? That's a bad question to ask. I have to change it because the person may say no, right? It is a leading question. But if I say, would you please expand on that? Just give them a statement. Then the person will expand. Tell me a little bit more. The person is going to explain themselves better. So right there, you see how my natural tendency to go to leading questions just show up in my PowerPoint. So just avoid yes or no answers. Okay. Here's the fun part. Celebrating. And this is not about having parties, okay? You can have parties if you want to, but it's not necessarily that. It's supervisor, it's very important that you are verbally recognizing the people that you're working with. Why is it important? It's not for them to feel good about themselves. It's because sometimes people do not take the time to celebrate themselves. Sometimes people don't even recognize that they have accomplished something that was important. And you as an outsider give them a great gift to point it out at them. This happens a lot with women and people who are caregivers or they're taking charge of other people. I see it a lot on women because we are so used to multitasking and moving from one thing to the next. We forget to stop and acknowledge the accomplishments that we make. So it is very important that you as a supervisor are able to celebrate when somebody did something right. For example, you can say something like, you mentioned you were really nervous about making that presentation. Look how you prepared yourself and made an excellent presentation, right? It doesn't take very long. Probably the person that did the presentation will want to move into something different, like as soon as they're finished and go and do something else. It is important for you to take the time and make sure that you are celebrating that. Gotta stay careful though. Sometimes people may want to be looking for your approval all the time. So you gotta be like very sensitive about how to use the celebration part. Because you don't want people to be engaged that every time they do something good, they're waiting for that bone, that kind of like feedback. Although you want to give it, we want to be careful also that they are not expecting you to be always giving that approval. Here's another example. When you say you would do X, you say you would do X, and I can see how happy you are with this result. Kind of these are ways to celebrating your people by pointing at them what they did right, without saying necessarily, well, I'm super proud of you. It's kind of like enticing them to be proud of themselves and what they have done. Championing. Championing is another tool that is good to use, and this is done before somebody does something. When people are feeling very insecure, they don't feel they can accomplish something, you do things like saying, I know you can get that done. Like, for example, with the interns and the example that we got earlier. It's fine. I know you can do it. Don't hold back. It's time to go for it. You've done it before, and you can do it again. A tool that I use a lot when I'm coaching people is tell me about a time in which you were able to make this something happen for you that you didn't think it was going to happen, right? It helps people to evaluate and think about the times they have been able to accomplish something that they think they couldn't. So those are a few good tips about how to go about coaching people. And now we are going to go and practice a little bit, a few coaching questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a statement that is not a coaching question, or it's going to be a question that is leading or closed question. And what we're going to do together is to transform it into a question that is open-ended and allows for people to input their thinking. Okay, so let's start with the first one. And I want to ask you to, all of you, to unmute yourselves so that we can kind of like see what good ideas come up here. The first one. Question. Do you like this project? How can we transform this question to an open-ended question? Remember, we have what, how, when.
I would say, what about this project do you like?
Mhm.
Yeah,
I agree.
Perfect.
I agree. That's what I was saying.
Yeah.
What is it
Good
about the
question.
project? Yeah.
Mhm.
That you like?
Any other ideas? What do you say, Laura? I couldn't hear you very well.
Her microphone isn't working.
So I'm inputting it on the chat.
She's putting her answers in the chat.
Okay, let me
Oh,
go to the chat real quick.
oh, yep.
What do you think? It is nice. Okay. How about you, Michelle?
What did you achieve with this project?
Uh-huh.
Mm.
Yeah. Very good. It's a very good way to help the person look into what positive outcomes came out of the project. Any other ideas?
How about, how was this project successful? Or how did this project fail?
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. How do you envision this project?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah,
Difference.
yeah, that's a good one,
Mhm.
April. Actually, my answer here is kind of similar to yours. Let me see. I have, what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on this project? How could it be improved?
Mhm.
So, you know, it will help
Mm.
people to say, okay, I think the project went well. I think next time we should do these other things, right? It helps them, it empowers them to come up with other things as well. But all your questions were great. This is just a sample of something that you could say.
Mhm.
Let's go with another one. Let's say you have a staff member who really needs to improve in the technology or needs to do better at keeping track of something. And they need to use their software that they have available a little bit better. How can you ask this question in a different way. Have you tried using this new software feature? First of all, before we move into that, what would a person answer if you ask them that question?
No,
No,
Yes or
or
no?
yes, no.
Or yes,
Yeah.
right? And they will come up with like a problem, say, but it didn't work for me, or right? So how can you ask a question that is related to the person using the software or this feature in the software that is non-leading, that helps them see beyond?
you could ask what are the aspects of this software that you like?
Yes,
Mhm.
that's a great question. Yep.
How about, did you come across any hurdle while you were using this software?
Mm.
Then you get an
Yeah.
answer yes or no.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
But if you get that, Sharon, then you can say, oh, let's say, do you come in any other hurdle? Yes, I did. What aspects of that were difficult? Michelle, go ahead.
Would you recommend this software?
Okay, yeah,
Yeah, or why would
Mhm.
you recommend it? That's good.
yep. I have a question with a how. So my question is how we best utilize the software feature to improve
oh.
workflow.
Mm,
How do you think we can best utilize it?
that's
Right?
good.
This
Mhm.
feature that I want you to use, but you're not using. How can we best utilize it? For the person into thinking, well,
Mm.
I think it could help me with this, it could help me with that, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And so on.
Mhm.
Oh, here's one from Laura. Have you thought about using a software? Yes, or the software. That can lead a little bit to yes and no, but they can lead you to ask the next question. And this is a good thing that we are experiencing. Like if you have a yes or no answer, you can also ask a following up question, right? You don't have to have it like perfect all the time. Sometimes you do need a yes or no answer so that you can follow up with a question that is last minute. Okay, let's try another one. Yeah. Do you agree with the proposed timeline? How may we adjust this question?
What are your thoughts on this proposed timeline? Like, what are your thoughts?
Yes, excellent.
Yeah. Yeah.
God bless you.
Let's say you have the person, you actually need them to meet that goal. What kind of question would you ask?
Is there anything you need to meet this deadline?
That's perfect.
Oh.
Yes.
Well, but that can lead to a yes or no answer too. Well, then you
And-
follow it up with,
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
right.
Awesome.
What would keep you from accomplishing it or following it?
Yep.
Right. Yep.
Perfect. I have, what adjustments can we make to the timeline to ensure that we meet our project goals? So, these different options, and it all depends on what you need. I think all your answers are perfect. All of them are great. And so the science here has to do with being very active and listening to the person, being very curious, and come up with questions that are, simple to the point, which you guys did very well. And, just continue doing that. I have a few more questions, and I'm going to stop the share for a second. I had the temptation of putting you into groups, but I don't think our time will allow us for that. So I'm just going to shoot these questions in the air, and we can think about answers together. Here's one closed question. Is there a better way to organize our files? Yes, Michelle.
How would you like to put together a schedule to reach our goal?
Awesome.
Are we answering the question that you just said about organizing our file?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there a better way to organize our files? How can you put it in a way that intends for people to be, you know, more proactive into organizing files?
Can we brainstorm another way to do the files, or,
Yeah.
or work
Yeah.
on it together or something like that?
Yeah, I love that. You're applying
Yeah.
exactly what we were talking about, right?
Yeah.
Asking for permission to brainstorm in other
Yeah.
ways that the files can be organized.
Mm.
April is actually going through the very scenario right now because you're moving, right? Uh-huh. So you really want your team to get engaged into this move. Mhm. So, for example, what ideas do you have to organize our files in a way that is more optimal? Right? Where do you think organizing our files will fit into your schedule? Versus like, can you do this or not? Right? Where in the schedule will this fit? How do you think these files can be organized better? If you think about like the formula of using this question started, most of the time you will be able to get a answer that is more of a brainstorm thinking answer than a yes or no. Okay, I'm going to give you another question that is close. Are there any issues with the current process? Are there any issues with the current process?
You can use what? What are the issues with the current process?
Yeah. Michelle?
How would you like to proceed with this process?
Yeah. Sounds great.
My boss is a big proponent of the use of this phrase is how might we? Always.
Mm.
How might we?
Uh-huh.
How might we? So she's a part of the process and everybody else is engaged in the process. It's pretty much her mantra on anything and everything we tackle, which is and also when we're
Yes.
when we're doing visioning work as well. I mean, it's so useful a phrase to bring everybody in.
Yes, absolutely. We is a great way to work. But if you're gonna use it, you have to make sure you will be involved in the right. Because a lot of leaders use we, but they don't get involved. So then it feels like the question that Katie was asking before. People feel like, oh
Right.
yeah, there's always a we, but where's
Mhm.
leader, right?
Right.
So you want to make
We
sure it's
without,
going to be
right.
a week work as well. Yes. But it's a great way to engage people. We are all coming together to problem solve. It's not one person's issue. It's all of us. Okay, are there any issues with the current process? I have what improvements can we make to the current process? Which was similar to what Michelle said earlier. Okay, one last one. What did you enjoy the last team building activity?
Repeat that again. I'm sorry.
Did you enjoy the last team building activity?
Oh, that's a good one, Laura.
Hmm?
Laura's in her chat. That's a good one.
Listen,
Let me see.
what did you learn?
What did you learn from? Yep.
Mhm.
Like, what was your takeaway?
What did you learn from our team building activity?
Mhm.
That's a good one.
Or the opposite, what would you say was missing from our last
Mhm.
team building?
You can say things like, what are some ideas for our next team building?
Mhm. How would you change?
How would you change?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What did you enjoy the most? What did you enjoy the least? What could we do
Mhm.
next? That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Or how about well, this is not a who, what, when. I was gonna say, oh no. I was gonna say did it, but no, that's a yes, no question. Never mind.
And even if you get a yes or a no, you can follow up with what did you enjoy the most? Or what did you like the least?
Right.
What could have been done differently? Right? So I think you guys are very good at this. Do you see yourself applying this kind of conversational style?
Yes.
Right? And so the more you practice it, the better you are just really gonna get on. I'm wondering if anybody has any ideas, departing thoughts, things that they want to share that they do themselves.
This can be applied in just about every interpersonal relationship, even outside of coaching. I have a phrase when things get challenging, or maybe I've already shared this, when people are approaching me to complain and rather than problem solve, and they just complain and complain and like just want to drag you into the muck. My phrase is, I really don't know what to say. And then encouraging, like, oh wow, as best as I can, show that I am supporting, but not getting mired in everything. And just, it's not quite clarifying, but it's like, oh yeah, I really don't know what to say, because then you don't have to get dragged in, but it still allows them to be heard. And I don't know, it's something I learned, like, I don't know, 15 years ago. So when my boss used it on me, I didn't really particularly like it, but it was because I shared it with her. I said, this is how I approach difficult people. And then she was like, oh, I really don't, I was like, oh, but it was, it brought us to a different place and ultimately an agreement. And I felt heard and whatever, so.
I
Yeah,
thought earlier in your presentation, Yvonne, I thought to myself, I could apply this to parenting. And then April, I think you dropped something in the chat that was
Yeah.
something very similar. There's a lot I could apply to. My kids are in their 20s now, and maybe I still could apply it, but to them, but when they were younger, it's what I could have implemented. Yeah.
you
in my
still can.
discussions with
And
them.
when kids are very young, sometimes this problem solving is not really necessarily appropriate to their age.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, true.
when they're very young, they are very concrete thinkers.
Mhm.
So, but once they have kind of like grown a little bit older and their prefrontal cortex is developing, it's a great time to implement this kind of communication style with them, and
Yeah.
even as they get older.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a great
When
way.
actually, when I guess, you know what, I guess maybe older, almost even, maybe even more now that I think about it, when you're kind of moving from parenting into more coaching, now that
Right.
they are older,
Yeah.
you're not really,
Yeah.
you're always maybe parenting them, but it's not,
The difference.
do it this way or this way, because I'm a parent, you're the child,
Mhm.
but now so actually, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe I need to rewatch this and
That's what I was thinking.
think about them instead.
One time my daughter said to me, why are you being like this? I just want you to be my mother and tell me what to do.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
And
That's
say,
funny.
okay, no, you can't.
Mm.
Well, I did a
That's
follow-up
funny.
question and I said, well, first I acknowledged how she was feeling, and I was like, I understand why you feel that way, but what do you think that you need my direction?
Yeah.
And she told me, and then I said, okay. this is, and then I gave her a couple of options. A good way to present advice, actually, by the way, is say, this is what I have done in the past.
Mhm.
This is what you should do.
Yeah,
Kind of,
yes,
this
Yeah,
is what worked
yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
yes.
I
Right?
always,
Yes.
yeah, I always go back from having 2 adult children. I've learned that I don't really tell them to do anything. I just basically ask them, when they ask me for my opinion or whatever, I kind of give them the autonomy to research. So I'm like, hey, did you look into that? Or maybe you want to
Mhm.
do XYZ, how about, asking so and so or seeing if that works or stuff like that. I don't
Mhm.
dare say, well, you should, or why don't you? I don't do
Mhm.
that,
Mhm.
because you'll find a pushback because they'll be like, I'm grown.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I don't even do that. I make them have the conversation and then I just say, oh, well, or like you said, Yvonne, I'll say, well, when I was your age, or I did it this way. But I mean, that's just me. The times have changed. You always have to add that. You have to let them know that
Absolutely. And
that
it's true because times have
Right.
changed.
times
And,
have changed. You have to add that because
what
Right.
worked for
that's
us,
yeah. Because if you don't
you
add
know,
that piece, then they're like, that was when you were. So I'm like, yeah, back in those days.
Those days, right, exactly.
having a fight in the backyard with another kid was maybe okay back then, but not anymore.
Right, right.
Exactly.
Um, awesome. And going back to what April was saying, yes, that acknowledgement, right? I understand your predicament. Yet, how can we move past? Like, what are the
Mhm.
solutions that we can find?
Mhm.
And like I said before, it's not necessarily that you agree, but given the circumstances, you can agree that the person is feeling the way they feel.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Not that you think it is okay. It's just that because of what
Right.
that person is experiencing, you can see how it's
Yeah.
affecting them in certain manner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, you have to show the empathy. You have to be able to understand and just, meet them at where they are and just say,
Mhm.
okay,
Mhm.
I get it, but you don't want to be stuck here. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what you have to somehow in a nice, gentle way push on. It's just like, oh, so let's see what we can do to,
Yeah.
because people will stay stuck. If you
Mhm.
Yeah.
pity party with them, remember I told you, don't come to my pity party. I'm not having one, So it's just kind of like, okay, so this happened and that happened and this happened. So what are you gonna do? Let's figure it out. We'll do that,
Mhm.
there's some answers. Let's go through some stuff. But um people are waiting to have that share feeling, so to speak, but they
Yeah.
want you to bring the tears and bring the
Yeah.
napkins and
Yeah.
stay there.
Yeah.
We don't stay there.
Yeah.
We share and we get past it and we say, listen,
Yeah.
tomorrow's another
Absolutely.
day. Let's work it out today. Let's cry and boohoo today, and then let's call each other tomorrow and get it going.
Right, right.
You have to do it that
What you
way.
want them is to understand, like you want to help them
Mhm.
see the benefits of moving
Yes, yes.
away from this, right? Yes, we do need to be understood. We need our feelings to be acknowledged.
Mhm.
And then we need to see why moving away from those feelings is beneficial to us, to our health, to the way we think about life, and so on. And as a manager coach, that's what you will be doing with the people that you are supervising, working
Yeah.
with, or even other coworkers.
Mhm.
Practicing having these coaching conversations every day, right? Will benefit them greatly, and it will benefit you too, because you will be able to kind of like see in these working relationships, in these friendships, in these family relationships, like the bigger picture, right?
Yvonne, I just realized we went way over our end
Oh yeah.
time.
Oh,
We did.
Sorry, guys.
So thank you for everybody for
Oh,
sticking in
I
with us.
think we were having fun.
Time
I
flies
know.
when you're
I
having
think the
fun.
conversation was, it was too good to end, I guess.
What
Yeah,
time is it?
It's almost
two-
2:30. This was supposed to end
almost
at 2.
2:30.
Oh, wow.
That's
You just
great.
kept going. I just
That's
looked
great.
down.
I
If
did not
Kate, if
realize the
Katie
time.
didn't say you didn't say anything, I wouldn't even have realized it. I have no clock. The computer puts up all the time.
Well, I hope the extra time was useful for you guys.
It
Thank you
was.
so much for sharing your thoughts and for
Definitely.
you know, for us to allow us to learn from one another.
Wonderful.
Yes.
See you
Yes.
next month. Thank you.
Yes.
All right.
you.
Have a great
Thank
afternoon,
you.
everybody.
Great
Bye.
day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.